Okay, so Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to all of you on behalf of the organizers of this event, the Government of Sweden, PAX and Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. We're excited to convene this discussion on the sidelines of the 66th session of the Commission of the Status of Women, and we will discuss the nexus of gender, conflict, and environment. Today, we aim to have an open and interactive discussion on different gendered impacts of conflict on the environment, as well as the importance of gender equality in influencing environmental peace building in conflict-affected areas. My name is Maha Yassin, and I'm a junior research fellow at the Clickendall Institute that hosts the Planetary Security Initiative, and I will moderate this discussion. To start off, while others are still joining, I will go over some housekeeping notes. For today's events, we have simultaneous interpretation available in Arabic and Spanish. Please select interpretation in the Zoom screen and select your language preference, Arabic, Spanish, or English. Also, select mute original audio to hear the translator only. First, we will listen to an opening remarks by Ms. Matilda Halt, the Policy Advisor for Environment and Climate Justice and Gender Equality at Concord, Sweden. Then we move to the panel discussion where 4 remarkable women activists from South Sudan, Syria, Iraq, and Colombia will share their perspectives with us. Following the panel discussion, there will be an opportunity for the audience to pose questions. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the discussion in the Q&A box. And if you are asking a specific panelist to answer, please also indicate that. And finally, Ms. Elise Birming, Gender Advisor at PAX, will conclude today's event with final remarks. Now I would like to turn it over to Ms. Matilda Halt, the Policy Advisor for Environment and Climate Justice and Gender Equality, and the representative of the Sweden delegation to the Commission of the Status of Women. Who will start our discussion with opening remarks. Ms. Halt, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good day, and good evening, everyone. I'm Matilda, and as Mahan said, I come from Concord, Sweden, a CSO platform in Sweden, but I'm also on the delegation, Swedish delegation to CSW. So I'm representing Sweden here today. Sweden is very happy to co-sponsor this event, and personally, I'm very honored to speak on in such good company on such an important topic. The disastrous effects of the climate crisis are becoming more apparent by the day. The recent IPCC report clearly shows that the changing climate, together with intertwined biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation, has already caused widespread impacts, losses, and damages to nature and people's lives. But these effects are unequal. Intersecting socio-economic factors, inequity, and marginalization are decisive. Communities that have contributed the least are hit the hardest. Meanwhile, long-lasting conflicts in many parts of the world continue to destroy people's lives and their surroundings. The invasion of Ukraine being the most recent, very horrific example, also with clear gendered consequences. Efforts to build and sustain peace become more difficult as climate change directly affects the dynamics and ongoing conflicts and increases the likelihood of new ones. In turn, wars lead to further emissions and degradation and limit people's possibilities to make choices that are environmentally sustainable. Conflicts and the environmental crisis are unfolding in a world where gender inequalities are deeply rooted. Unequal patriarchal power structures based on gender norms exacerbate the vulnerabilities of women, girls, and LGBTQI persons and further diminish marginalized communities' ability to build resilience. In people's lives at the front line of these crises, the links between conflict, environmental degradation, resource use, and gender inequalities are often very apparent, as I'm sure we will hear from the panelists today. There's also a growing recognition at the policy level that the Women, Peace and Security agenda needs to better integrate climate and environmental risks. And there is language on this nexus in the draft CSW conclusions. Nevertheless, it seems that the connections still need to be better understood, explored, and also acted upon. Policy and action must be based on holistic intersectional analysis, address power structures, and put human rights at the center. For example, this includes ensuring gender-just climate finance that addresses root causes of both conflict and climate emergencies. It requires gender equal participation and influence in all decision-making related to environment and climate, as well as in peace building and the peace processes. It should also include gender-responsive support to and protection for environmental rights defenders. Today, environmental activists, not least from indigenous communities, are among the most threatened women human rights defenders. Sweden and Swedish stakeholders are supporting efforts in this nexus in different ways. Since 2014, Swedish feminist foreign policy has aimed to strengthen the rights, resources, and representation of women and girls globally, and participation in peace building has been one of the cornerstones. Swedish climate finance also integrates gender goals, and Swedish civil society work actively for enabling environment for women's rights groups and environmental defenders across the world, just to give some examples. On the research side, CIPRI does important research on climate security and gender, and this year's Stockholm Forum on Peace and Development in May, as well as the UN conference Stockholm +50 in June, will provide opportunities to further strengthen exchange on these issues. In our work at all levels, we need to continue to learn about the specific struggles and realities of women working for change in conflict-affected communities. I look very much forward to listening to the panelists today. As we all know, solutions must be based on the realities and knowledge of those most affected. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Halden. It's impressive also to hear what Sweden is doing in this field of work. And now I want to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and remind the audience to pose a question in the Q&A box. First, I want to start with Professor Julia Douani from South Sudan. Please, Professor Julia, introduce yourself and your work.
Thank you very much, Matilda, and thank you very much to all my sisters around the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's very great to be here, and I'm so excited to be a part of this great panelists. And I also want to thank Swedish government and especially PAX for the tremendous work they are doing around the world on peace and women support and support of the communities around the world. And particularly in South Sudan, where PAX has been with us for a very long time, taking us through the war and through the peace, they have been with us. My name is Julia Kerdouani, and I'm a professor of education at Dr. John Garang University here in South Sudan. I had been a peace activist for a very, very long time, since the first war from 1950s, when I was a young girl, to becoming an adult, becoming a mother, and becoming a grandmother in a war. And now, I don't know, it is time for peace. So I have been in this for a long time. And I hope I will not die in the war again. I hope it will be a time for peace for me to rest. So I have been in this thing for a very long time, so it has been my life. I have been working with the women, and I have seen all kind of suffer, and you know, the lifestyle our women have gone through, the women and the children, what kind of conflict they have gone through, and what it has done to their life. So this is what have been in my life all time. So I hope sharing the experience and being with my sisters around the world sometimes is like is like a therapy to me. So I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Jira. We're also glad to have you here. And the next person I want to call Isra Falah Hassan from Iraq to introduce herself and her work.
مساء الخير جميعاً. أنا إسراء فلاح.
Good afternoon. I am Isra from Iraq. I am a lawyer and I am an environmental activist. I want to pay tribute to all women all over the world, especially on this special occasion, on this special month. And I would like to pay tribute to all the panelists and all the participants in this webinar. And I believe that as we are here to make the voice of all women heard. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. And in fact, I have been an environmental activist since 2015. And I got interested in environment because I saw how the environmental issues and the environmental challenges are affecting the Iraqi people as a whole, but women in particular. I saw families, I saw women-led households lose their source of incomes because of the environmental challenges. And that's when I really saw how much the conflict is and how much the environmental deterioration is really is affecting women in Iraq, especially precarious women. I believe that the future belongs to our children and to our youth. That's why I focused mainly on awareness raising of the youth and of the children. And we organized awareness raising campaigns and activities to raise the awareness of children and of our youth on the environment, on environmental issues, on climate change challenges. Especially that when we started our environmental activities, really the issue of environment was completely overlooked and completely neglected in my country. That's why I felt that I had the duty as a woman and as a human being to participate in this struggle for a better environment and also for more gender equality. Thank you.
And now I go to Alva from Syria. Please, Alva.
Good afternoon. I would like in turn to thank the organizers of this webinar. I am Alva Ali from northeastern Syria. I am also a human rights and a non-violent, I'm a human rights and a peace activist. I was also an activist and a project officer at the Civil Society Association, and now I am working on creating a human rights and non-violence center. I am an environmental activist, and I had the chance to participate to the Euro-Med environmental dialogue, and this dialogue that was held in Tunisia, and that it was really an opportunity for me to gain more experience when it comes into the environment and to environmental issues. And we launched, also supported by a PIL association, we launched an initiative, and we apologize, but Mrs. Alva's voice is breaking, so we are doing our best. So one, and this initiative was on reducing the use of plastic, and we even proposed a policy that will a policy to reduce the use of plastic and to protect the environment. And we said that we should start with the civil society associations themselves, and we proposed a policy paper that incites civil society organizations to start the environmental change from themselves. Thank you.
Miss Diana, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sí, muchas gracias. Buenos
Yes,
días.
thank you. Good day, good afternoon to everyone who's here listening to us in this space. We would like to thank Sweden, who has been an ally, a tireless ally to Colombia in our process towards peace, and of course our sisters from PAX who have been very important in the work that we're doing as WILPF Colombia. So I'm Diana Salcedo Lopez. I'm the director in Colombia of WILPF in Colombia, or LIMPAL as it's known in Colombia. We're one of the oldest organizations in the world from 1915, and we've been working towards peace in different countries around the world. And in Colombia, for the last 23 years, we've been working on the process of rebuilding our country in the time of this conflict that we've been experiencing for the last 50 years. And we are really feeding ourselves from our sisters' struggle in all these countries around the world who have fought against the wars and have established a critical position on this, which has to do with the care of the environment. We've also been working on this process in Colombia, not only accompanying the women who have been impacted by armed conflict, but also from a critical perspective and a reflective practice in terms of what peace and security means for women. So in this sense, we have contributed to the reflection of widening the interpretation of the feminist security for humanity, and this has to be intersectionality, and it has to be focused on militarism, not only in the bodies of women, but also in the environment and our nature. And so this has been part of our work in Colombia. We've been carrying out a work that's very broad in terms of the political agenda, and of course, connected to the rights of women and the implementation of the peace agreement, but also in processes of social transformation, which go to eradicate all forms of violence against women, and of course, establishing a policy in Colombia that's more in favor of the rights of women. So I send greetings to everybody in this space, and I thank you for have this space to be able to share the experience of Colombia. And we hope that this is a space that unites us in resistance and in a more dignified world for women.
Yes, thank you, Diana, and thank you all. And we are happy to have you here and learn from your experiences. Now, my first question goes to Professor Julia Douani. Professor Julia, communal conflict and civil war have left serious environmental impacts in South Sudan. And especially we see this in the unity state. Can you explain to us some specific examples of how conflict there has negatively impacted the environment and communities? And how does a gender lens help us understand these impacts more?
Thank you very much, Maha. You know, the conflict in South Sudan has been here very long. And the challenges has been very instrumental. Going to all over South Sudan and coming to unity states, which has been mounted by the oil development of the oil fields in unity states. It started in the 70s, and you know, there has not been a very well crafted policies and organized development so that the environmental policies could be followed to protect the environment. So there has been very much pollution in the area, an area which was very rich in resources. And you know, the Nile is the lifeline of the people of South Sudan. The tributes of the Nile flow all over in the unity area, and those tributes has been affected by the oil field because the pumping of the water from the oil wells were being pumped outside on the land, and that has affected the cattle, which is the lifeline of our people. It has also affected the lifeline of the birds in the area, the animals, the wildlife, because we have also a lot of wildlife in the area, and those are now, some of the animals have also stink because of this pollution in the area. The type of trees which are in the area, we have type of trees which are fruits that are edible in the area. Those type of trees are no longer there because of the pollution. So it has really affected the life of people. Also with the war situation, which have displaced a lot of people from the area. So it has really affected the life of people. The pollution itself, and you know, the oil companies which are in the areas are oil companies which are coming from outside. And you know, they don't care about the life of the people in the area. And there are no strong policies that can hold them accountable so that they can really be able to be held accountable if they pollute the area. And this has been a challenge. Although the South Sudanese as a people have been really voicing it out, and particularly the women coming together and voice it out, which is also affecting the life of people. There are children who are born, you know, with this formation to this to the life of the people in the area itself. These policies need to be very strong so that these companies can be held accountable. This has been a challenge for us, and it's something that really need our government, as a government of South Sudan, need to have strong policies to hold these companies accountable so that the pollution issues can be addressed. The oil companies need to be held accountable so that they can address the pollution issues. It is not just only pumping the oil and taking it out of the land, but also the people who are living on the land has also to be considered. These people who are living in the land, they have to be really considered. This is their land, their lifestyle, and their safety is very important. They were drinking water. We used to drink water everywhere because all these streams, you know, because it is fresh water. The fish, you find fish everywhere in South Sudan, especially during the rainy season. All these streams will be full of water. And you know, the young people will go out, even the young children, they will go and catch the fish with their hands. Now you can't do that because all these places are polluted and you can't find this fish outside. So there is a really challenge for us in this oil field in the area. That pollution is very bad and it needs to be addressed. So I think for us in the South Sudan, it is a concern, and it is a concern that needs to be addressed, and we need support to address these issues of pollution in South Sudan.
Yeah. Yes, thank you, Professor Julia. So I hear that people's livelihoods is very affected in this regard because of the oil pollution, and it's exacerbated also by the conflict. And of course, vulnerable communities, including women and children, are the most affected in this kind of area. My second question to you, in your work, you focus on women leadership and education. So what can be done more to support women leadership in reducing the impact of conflict on the environment and the natural resources in South Sudan?
What I do actually is to help women in education, especially help our women in terms of especially women who are parliamentarians to be able to understand the policy issues. If the policy is brought to the parliament, they need to read it and understand it and be able to raise the issues and be able to see that that policy address the concern of the people. That's one area. The other area also, we do train the women in the parliament so that they know how to draft the bill, so that they can raise the bills and be able to draft that bill and be able to support it until all the way back. Also, we do train the women in the leadership position, especially in the ministries, so that the policies in the government, in the ministries, like the policy, the acts that are drafted very well, and they also see that the gender voice is raised and the issues are raised, that the women also have a voice in it, to see that those policies are diverse and women voices are raised in there. So we do train them so that they understand the issues. And if they don't understand the issues, then those issues don't get into those policies. This is what we do a lot in training them. I think my time is out, and we can later add more if there's more questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much for your insight, Professor Julia. Now I go to Ms. Isra Falah Hassan, who's an environmental activist joining us from Iraq. Isra, wars and years of internal conflict have also left their mark on the environment in Iraq. How is this affecting women in particular?
قبل لا أجاوب على السؤال يؤسفني إنه أسمع من البروفيسورة إنه هم
Before I answer your question,
بالنسبة للتغيرات المناخية اللي صارت العراق
I would like to say that Iraq is one of the countries that is most affected by climate change. And it is a hot zone in fact, and a hot zone from it's a zone that is known for its biodiversity, and Iraq is also a home for the migrating birds. Unfortunately, the chemical weapons that were used in the 80s also, of course, killed so many innocent people, but at the same time, they burned completely to the ground a whole area in the Kurdistan. And this area happened to be an agriculture area that provided a source of income, and that was the livelihood of the local population. And with the chemical weapons attack, the whole agricultural land was decimated, and which completely destroyed also the livelihood of the local population in this area. And the category that was the most affected were women. Women, of course, who already are a vulnerable and precarious category, and with the environmental deterioration, the vulnerability and precarity of women increased. And when women are deprived of their livelihood, they are forced to leave their home, to leave their lands, and to move to another area where she would find herself a stranger in a stranger land, and with a different culture, with a different challenges that she and her family have to address. Of course, all these challenges were compounded with Daesh or ISIS occupation, and we know that all the violations of ISIS and also led to more deterioration of the environment. This deterioration that we saw in our water, in our farming lands, and this means, and of course, in the pollution of air. And this means that the Iraqi women were affected by all these environmental issues, and they were also exposed to all kinds of violence, sexual violence, psychological violence, economic violence, and decade after decade, the Iraqi women really were the victims of wars, of conflicts, of violations, of discrimination, of violence. It is really painful. It has been painful for the Iraqi women, and the Iraq, in unfortunately, who has historically been a water-rich country, unfortunately, by 2040, Iraq will suffer from water scarcity, something that was unimaginable for Iraqis. And that's why, as Iraqis, but mainly as women, we felt that we had to raise our voice. We had to mobilize, and this is what also triggered me, what really was the spark for me to become an environmental feminist activist. Thank you.
My second question is about the women activist working on environment and climate. You know that since the grassroots movement in Iraq that started in Basra in 2018 and followed by bigger protests in 2019 across the country, activists were treated with suspicion, and a lot of them were targeted. Are women environmental activists facing similar risks? And can you tell us about the difficulties that women activists working on the environment and climate, the difficulties that they are facing?
الناشطات البيئيات العراقيات هن أكثر الناشطات اللي تعرضن لخطر المضايقة من
Environmental women activists are, of course, exposed to all kinds of violations and aggressions, even. And we try, as women environmental activists, we try to raise our voice whenever we see that there is a threat on our environment. You know that the all privileges in Iraq go to the oil sector, to the oil companies. These oil companies that work with utter impunity and without any accountability. And the oil companies and that, of course, lead to air pollution, water pollution, and that also lead the oil activities that lead to the unfortunately proliferation of cancer in Iraq. And we have also in Baghdad, in Basra, and in other areas in Iraq, we have hospitals that are supposed to be a place where patients come for treatment. Unfortunately, what is happening in these hospitals is that there is even pollution with the hospital waste. And for example, there are tests that are in these hospitals that are carried out with toxic substance. And so imagine a cancer patient going to this hospital for treatment, for a chance to recover, and he or she is injected with toxic chemical substances. So unfortunately, pollution is all over the place. Now, what do we do as women activists? So we, of course, we raise awareness on environmental challenges, on the climate change threats. For example, we launched an awareness raising campaign on when there was a dam that was being built also, and that unfortunately will direct all Iraq water resources to Iran. We mobilized against the construction of this dam. So whenever we see that there is an environment cause that requires our mobilization, we mobilize. We also organize cleaning even of public space, cleaning activities of public space. And to answer your question also about the violations against women environmental activists, I can give you an example of a woman activist in Basra who was threatened, and her life was threatened. She received a life threat, a death threat, and we had to evacuate her from Basra. And until this very day, she cannot return to Basra because the death threat is still hanging over her. We are, as activists also, we are also unfortunately exposed to violations, to assaults, physical and verbal assaults, to intimidation, to efforts to tarnish our reputation. So, of course, as environmental activists, we are exposed to all kinds of oppression and repression. Thank you.
I'm very proud as well, like as an Iraqi myself, I'm also proud that even there are very serious threats to women activist safety, they are still advocating for a better environment and calling to address climate impacts in Iraq. Now I go to Alva Ali, who is an activist from Ahimsa Center Network for Nonviolent Leaders in Syria. Alva, my first question to you, what are the main environmental challenges arising from the conflict in Syria, and how are these challenges affecting women?
بالبداية بدي أعبر عن أسفي لأنه سمعت البروفيسورة.
First of all, I believe that what we have in common is not only our struggle for peace and for rights. What is also common to us is the challenges that we are all encountering wherever we are in this world. Just like we heard from Isra in Iraq, just like we heard from Julia, Professor Julia, yes, the challenges are the same. And I want to talk about the Syrian context, but in particular, I wanted to talk about the northern eastern part of Syria, because this is where I come from. And of course, conflict and war have seriously affected the environment. For example, when the conflict started in our area, people started cutting trees for heating purposes. And we know that in the northern eastern part of Syria, this area is known also for its oil sector, and the oil extraction and was done in a without any respect to the environmental factors or the environmental conditions, and which of course led to pollution, air pollution, water pollution, and of course these environmental issues affect the whole population, but they affect all the more women. And since in our life as you know that our culture is still a patriarchal culture, women are always the first victims of discrimination and of violations. And what happened in our region is that when women lost their livelihood, they had to, of course, to go to extreme length to fulfill the needs of their families. And this meant that women had to bear more responsibilities, but these growing responsibilities did not at all pave the way for women to sit on the decision-making table. No, when there are decisions to be taken, when there are policies to be made, women who are the real actors on the ground, who are really shouldering the biggest responsibilities, these women are completely excluded from the decision making and from policy setting. And of course, when we talk about the impact of the conflict on women, we have to mention also the impact of conflict on the internally displaced women, because the IDPs are already in a precarious situation, and they of course they are already affected by the war. They had to leave everything behind to live in a new environment, and with the degradation of deterioration of the environment, of course, this adds up to their hardship.
Yes, thank you very much, Alva. My second question is, in your opinion, how can climate change and environmental peace building be an entry point for dialogue among conflicted parties? And what kind of role women can assume in environmental peace building in Syria?
تمام. شكرا مها، السؤال جدا
Thank you
مهم.
so much for this question, Maha. That is indeed a very relevant question, because it allows us to talk about or to propose solutions. And because if we want to build a real peace, we have to lay the right conditions and to create the enabling environment and conducive environment for this peace. And the first step for this conducive environment should be the participation of women. And unfortunately, the role of women has been neglected, even completely overlooked, and in the peace building efforts. And how do we create this favorable environment? First and foremost, by facilitating women participation in peace talks. And in fact, in our area, we have committees in the different municipalities, committees that handle environmental issues. And these committees, municipal committees, are supposed to have among their members women, a certain number of women. And yes, maybe if we go and visit these municipal committees, we would see women there, but it's only as a formality. And we don't see that these women, and I'm giving this just as an example, these women are present like just to do a job just like any other job. We don't feel that there is a real commitment to women and environmental costs. I can give you another example. We wanted to rehabilitate a public garden that was also affected by the conflict. And we wanted to rehabilitate this garden. So we organized a meeting meeting with the local population to discuss the plans for the rehabilitation of this public garden. And men did not hesitate at all to come to the meeting, to speak up. And but women, they simply did not show up. And when we asked the women around us, why didn't you come to the meeting? Many of them told us, you know, I don't want to rehabilitate this garden. You know what? Because a woman told us, I have a disabled son, and I have a spot in this garden where I would take my son for a walk. Why do you want to touch this garden? This is my son's spot. Another woman who told us that, you know, I'm not at all interested in this project because also I'm using a small spot of this garden to plant my vegetables and my fruits. So you see that they each had something at stake. So, and this is the importance of awareness raising. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alva, also for giving us this example of your work and how to negotiate and enter in dialogue for the communities who are affected. So I hear similar challenges from Professor Julia, Isra, and Alva on, and also a remarkable role that women are taking in their environmental and climate work. Now I go to the other side of the world, to Ms. Diana Salcedo Lopez, the director of Women's International League for Peace and Freedom in Colombia. Ms. Diana, my first question, Colombia has also witnessed a lot of conflict and militarization. What are some specific examples of how the conflict has negatively impacted the women, and how does gender lens help us understand these impacts? So I have the same question to you as Professor Julia.
Thank you. Yes, and the other side of the world, women also feel the same kind of impact many of the same things as like and Ezra and Julia were talking about. We have to remember that in Colombia has faced a time of armed conflict that has taken a long time, which has left a lot of impact in the population, in the communities, and of course in the land, in the environment, and the territories. So the first thing I want to mention is from our reading, it's not a crisis that we're living on the environmental level, but it's a system, the capitalist system, the patriarchal system, the militarist system that impacts disproportionately the life of women. And so this, we can't say that all women are impacted in the same way, but we can say that we have some impacts and some commonalities that could be looked at from a reflection on this issue. And so I wanted to mention that in Colombia in 2021 contributed 33% of local emissions of winter effects. And so, and this happens because in Colombia in 2021, there was a deforestation of 1,700,000 hectares of forest. And this has an impact not only on Colombia, but in all of Latin America and the world because of what the destruction of the woods and the forest means and the destructions of lands. So what are the causes of these deforestation? So it's not only the day-to-day lives of the communities, which have to be regulated, but we're also living a concentration of lands. 1% of the population has 99% of the territory, and this has a very strong impact in terms of this concentration of property. But we also see some very terrible practices um, in farming, in infrastructure of transportation, and of course the illegal extraction of minerals, which the colleagues have also expressed how it impacts us very deeply. And I want to mention three things that in our analysis show how women in Colombia, and add into what the colleagues were saying, in the disproportionate impact. One, the climatic crisis. Colombia is one of the 11 countries is highest risk and least capacity to adapt to climate change, despite of what the government is saying, that is making very strong efforts, economic efforts to generate possibilities to face this climatic crisis. But in those preoccupations, we have that 1/3 of the departments in Colombia are in a greater level of vulnerability. And so that has four impacts in women. One is in the mental health impact, and that's connected to the economic situation of women who are responsible as well, as the colleagues were mentioning, of being able to obtain the food, also the reproduction of life, which goes much beyond just caring for people, an increase in the population due to more pregnancies, many of them non-desired, so less family planning, but also less effectiveness of the natural planning process because of hormonal changes due to the transgenic products that women are consuming in the different territories. So the third aspect, the women, as you all mentioned, she are one of the main providers of water. The lack of food security and the deterioration of the land and territory in Colombia makes it that women are more susceptible to illnesses, infections, but also more propense to something that we're looking at is early pregnancies and early weddings, because they're looking for better alternatives. Sometimes they want to accept a marriage at an early age to be able to change those unequal living conditions. And one third aspect is the impact that it has on women and families without home, the families that are internally displaced due to floodings and other disasters. but it also impacts our agriculture and their projects of life. And last thing is the spiritual connections of women with the land, the campesino or peasant communities, the Afro communities, the mestizo communities. We all have a reflection with this connection with the land and the territory. And so this connection is a very fundamental issue, which is very impacted by the climatic crisis. And I would love to, and maybe we don't have enough time, but I do want to mention the environmental impacts that militarism leaves on women, all the weapons that are, all the bombs that that are still potentially to explode, all the mines that are planted in the fields to be able to maintain an armed conflict, impact women, and of course the fumigation against the illegal crops in Colombia, which continue to be a reality, which is through B4SAT, which is a insecticide, which is very questioned around the world, and not only has impact to women in their physical health, but also for those who are pregnant, that have very big impact in pregnancy, that don't go to full term, or children who are born with different health issues in those territories.
Yes, thank you, Diana. I would also like to remind our audience to post their questions in the Q&A box. Diana, I want to end this panel discussion on a positive note. My second question will be, what are some innovative ways in which women have adapted to or mitigated some of the environmental risk associated with the conflict in their local communities? So what are some of the good practices in the field of the work in Colombia?
Gracias, Maja. Efectivamente, las
Thank you,
mujeres.
Maha. Effectively, Maha. The women don't only focus on the state. All of us, like Alva, Julia, we react to this impact of the system. Women who are in Colombia,
as well as other
a lot of
countries,
things
we
to
are doing a lot of
transform our
things to
practices from the
change our
day-to-day to the
practices
national
from the
level
daily
in a
practices at
way
home
that
to
impacts
the
more
national level
positively
in a
in
positive
our
way,
development
and our
with
relationship
our
with
relation to
nature
environment.
and
Just
the
for example,
environment. There's a lot of
one
examples.
is example
Rural
of the rural
women who
woman
are
in the area of the
guardians of
Catatumbo,
nature
in an area that's
in
been very hit by
Guayumpa
the
have
armed
been
conflict, where many
severely
women who have
affected
been
by
victim of
the
armed
armed
conflict have
conflict.
been
Excuse me, sorry, Diana, one second, please. For the Spanish interpretation, there's currently two. Can we have one interpreter, please, at a time? Okay, maybe let's just have Ron for now, and Diana, please continue.
Ok, gracias. Les decía de las mujeres en el
I was
Catatumbo.
saying that the women in Catatumbo don't just do educational activities, they also do cleanup activities in water sources and reforestation, and in another zone that is on the border is where a lot of environmental recovery and ecological recovery is happening. And in Yari, the women involved in development are also helping to reforest and promote healthy environments through flora and fauna and transformation of new mechanisms to heal and protect their water sources. In northern Colombia, another area very hard hit by the conflict, you might have heard of this, they are recovering their native seeds and preserving all seeds and grains that they used to eat, which because of GMOs and globalization have been lost. They have been able to rescue these seeds and grains, and they are beginning to circulate in the regular economy. In San Jacinto, Bolivar, we are accompanying women to transform yuca or sweet manioc flour and make other products that are closer to their native diet rather than relying on food that has been imposed on them by the capitalist system, and to more rely on the food provided by Mother Nature. And they are therefore helping to contribute to transformation of local practices. I wanted to mention these few examples. Young women are also doing a lot in Colombia to change the way we dress, and to have an effect on face masks that we're using in the pandemic, which are having a big negative impact on the environment, and they are trying to mitigate this.
Thank you very much, Diana. This is very insightful. Now I will take some questions from the audience. The first question, Diana, this question is for you. From Kerry, I feel something often overlooked in political discussion is the annihilation of spiritual connections with land, lost through environmental degradation and forced migration. Equally, the loss of indigenous knowledge. Do you have experience of communities facing this or measure that can help to rebuild these important connections?
No, no hay problema.
No problem. In Colombia, the communities in Cauca and in the north are facing different processes to fight to maintain their spiritual connections with the environment. In our constitutional court, which is our highest court for this, they have been able to reclaim the rights of the land and the relation that the indigenous people and Afro descendants have with the land. We all have this connection. Ethnic communities have taught us a lot. Also in Colombia and in other countries, I'm sure it's the same, this symbolism, this spiritual relationship is left aside by policymakers and legislators and is left to the sphere of the private sphere, as we call it. But many communities are publicizing how important these things are to their health, security, protection, through the declaration of the importance of this relationship. And in international law, we have collective rights, which play a very important role. It is very important to continue to say that women and communities are opposed to simply looking at the environment as something transactional, and that we need to resist these moves.
Thank you very much, Diana. I think Professor Julia also want to comment.
Yes, yes, Maha.
Yeah, we hear you.
Yes, I think most of our traditional, especially in Africa, we have lost those traditional way of life we used to govern ourselves. Some of this spiritual connection to the land have been lost due to adapting new ways of life of Christianity to Islam. These spiritual connections to the land, to the forest, to the water, were some of ideas how to share these resources. Like example of, say it is a time to go fishing. Nobody can just go to the water and fish on their own. You know, there is a spiritual activity that can be done by the elders to come, and then everybody goes into the water to fish. The idea is what to share, you know, the fish in the river, so everybody have a piece, you know, of resource. Those things has been lost, and these are some of the things which most of us in the area of research, of social research, that are being now retrieved in the research, you know, researching social and methods of connecting to our old way of life. What were those mechanisms that where people were living together in order to address the issues of now people fighting, or this communal fighting, or all these conflicts that are coming over the land, over the water? How were people, you know, administering these lands and connecting and sharing them? What were they doing before we were connected with outsiders? And these are some of the methods that can be retrieved, and people can go back to their way of life and sharing these resources. So those spirituality is very important. People are saying these are, you know, people are believing in witchcraft and all these things. It is not witchcraft. It is an idea of sharing a resource. So no one person, you know, claim greater from other people. And I think if they are retrieved and they are brought back, I think the community, we can minimize some of the communal resources, communal conflict that we are facing these days. And this is some of the things now we are researching at the university here in South Sudan to address some of the, looking at the, you know, how do people, you know, communal conflict, how do people were addressing, what were the, you know, peacemaking processes before we were, you know, getting the conventional peacemaking processes, how were people addressing their own conflict before we became, you know, what they call nation states, South Sudan. So these are some of the things that can help people in the modern time, you know, if we bring them back. I think that's what I can share, you know. And
Yes.
this is where now PAC is coming in, helping us, you know, in this traditional mechanism of way of addressing some of the challenges we are facing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Julia. And I think Elba also wants to respond to this question.
أنا بس كنت بدي أعطي إضافة صغيرة من واقع المنطقة، من واقع شمال شرق سوريا.
In fact, I just wanted to also comment on this spiritual bond. And you know, when we feel really this spiritual bond, we feel this spiritual bond when we lose the land. I can give you the example of Afrin. Afrin is a town where the local people had to cut the trees for heating. And in many videos on the social media and on TVs, we saw the people of Afrin, this small town, shedding tears and crying as they were cutting their tree. They felt that they had to because they needed the wood for heating, but at the same time they were crying because they had this really spiritual bond to nature, to their nature, to their trees. So when we really feel and understand the importance of this bond with nature, with land, when we lose it. And in many areas also we have seen, for example, in some towns that hosted internally displaced people from Afrin. In these host towns, the people of these towns planted olive trees. You know why? Because Afrin is known for its olive trees, and they wanted the refugees or the IDPs to feel even a little at home when they see the olive trees, because they know that this olive tree is just a symbol of the bond that the Afrin people had with their land. And when you hear many of the IDPs from Al-Hasake is another town in Syria, in northern eastern part of Syria. When you talk to the people from Al-Hasake, and you know what they will tell you? They will tell you, our trees, our water, our homes. This is what we miss. So when they say, these are our water, this is our water, these are our wells, these are our trees, this is our land. And when you become an IDP, you suddenly lose all this, and you really are aware of what you just lost, this bond with the land. Thank you.
Giving us concrete examples from what is happening on the ground. The second question is from Farzana Ali. Farzana asked, would you describe what are significant barriers to holding corporations accountable, as well as any other incidents of deliberate ways in which corporations are targeting women and women activists? I think, Asra, maybe you can respond to this question. I can also read it again.
أنا سعيدة أنه وجدتي إلي.
Okay.
لا وصلني السؤال، أنا سعيدة أن توجه لي سؤال. فيما يتعلق بالشركات النفطية،
regarding the oil companies, they come to Iraq as per contract signed with the Iraqi government, and unfortunately the Iraqi government does not impose on these oil companies any environmental condition. We had, for example, Chinese companies who came to Iraq, and in the contract there were some environmental clauses, but unfortunately nothing is really done to uphold and respect these environmental clauses. So there are no laws in Iraq that really force these companies to, for example, take into consideration the environmental impact of their activities. So nothing is stopping them. So that's why they feel that they are not accountable. And unfortunately, sometimes we have seen some of these foreign oil companies paying, I will say, commissions to some officials in Iraq not to include in the contract environmental clauses. And but if we can blame the foreign companies, what shall we say about the national oil companies in Iraq? Unfortunately, also even the national oil companies They do not respect and uphold the environmental terms and conditions in the contracts, and they do not uphold these environmental clauses because they are not accountable and nobody is holding them accountable. There are no penal or criminal clauses included in the contract even with the national companies, and that's why these companies, both national and foreign, because of this legal void, they just act as they wish with an absolute sense of impunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asra. If any other of the speakers want to respond to this question, otherwise I move to the next one. Okay, so the next question from Fiona. Fiona asked, how can we in European cities and in WILPF or PAX best support our sisters in South Sudan? And I mean, I think you meant here Iraq, Syria, and Colombia. Maybe Diana want to respond to this question?
Pues en el caso de Colombia, creo que
Well, in the case of Colombia, I think it's very important to be able to establish international support, not only for the implementation of the peace support, which has a specific focus on the use of land, the recuperation of those ancestral practices, but also because of the protocol of Estasu, which has not been ratified in Colombia, which would be very important to be able to have a control on what's occurring, principally with the killing of human rights and environmental women leaders, which is always increasing in Colombia with very alarming figures, not only due to the loss of life, but the loss of the people there that having to leave the country to be able to continue doing their organizing and to be able to raise our voices in this moment in Colombia, where we're going from a right-wing government to one that maybe is more in favor of the dignity of women and of life, to be able to break with this. Because in Colombia, we think some people think that because of the peace agreements, we have everything solved. But looking at this international support in terms of monocultivation, the facing against these multinational corporations that want to appropriate themselves of the land in Colombia.
Thank you, Diana. And I think Asra also wants to respond. Please, Asra.
أكو طريقتين أتمنى إنه يساعدونا كل النساء العالم بيها، يساعدون النساء النازحات.
I think we need the support of women all over the world, especially support for IDPs and refugees. For example, we have in many towns and many areas, we have small scale economic activities, like, for example, women who come together in a cooperative or in a small association to produce traditional Iraqi sweets that can, the Iraqi sweets that are made of the Iraqi dates. One way to help is to encourage these handcrafts activities, to buy these products, because they can easily be delivered even abroad. You have small tapestry, also small scale tapestry activities by women, especially by IDPs. or producing sweets or other traditional Iraqi meals. So it's really, it could be a moral contribution, but it would help a lot if you buy out these products, these traditional rugs or Iraqi traditional produce. And of course, I totally agree with our dear colleague from Colombia that your solidarity is what we need first and foremost.
Thank you, Asra. And Professor Julia also want to respond to the question, please.
Yes, I do agree with all my sister, and especially Alva when she was talking about the environmental connection. When we talk about our water, our trees, our land, and exactly that, you know, when I was talking about the sharing of resources, they belong to us. Like when you want to cut the tree created by God, and God has brought us here, they have to pray to cut down that tree. So you can see the sharing of knowledge. And I think sharing of local knowledge among ourselves, like what PAC has done today, you know, bringing us together in one room and now sharing the knowledge. I didn't know that in Syria or Iraq they can do the same thing like what they do in Africa is very instrumental. If we can share information, it could be, you know, what we do in South Sudan can also be similar like what they do in the Middle East or in Colombia. There was I saw a note on the there was somebody who posted that we train women. Yes, the training we do for women is we do a kind of workshops, you know, where the women parliamentarians, when they are new, elected and brought to the parliament, we do number of workshops to make orientations so that they can be able to understand how to do legislation, how to draft the bill, how to, you know, how to ask questions in the parliament, because sometimes they may not be familiar with the environment, how to do those things. And so for the women, they can be shy away if they don't know the knowledge. So we provide those knowledge so that they can be able to be competitive and be able to share, to be able to be compatible in the parliament. That's we do that. We do even train our governors, women who are elected as governors. We train them in leadership so that they can be very strong in their leadership wherever they are elected. You know, you do orientation. You polish them up to become a strong leader wherever they are. So we wanted to, you know, not to be challenged. Yeah, you are just a woman. No, you are a woman. You stand up and become a real woman in your own position when is providing you with the skills, with the knowledge, so that you cannot be considered just a woman. You were brought here, you know, because you are a number, but you came here because you have a knowledge that you can share with any man. That man has come because of knowledge. Me as a woman, I have come also because I have the knowledge. That's how we train them. It is not also training. We also do research, a lot of research, and we share that information with many of our leaders, women leaders, so that they can be informed. So when they debate, when they, you know, when they lecture, when they do, they have the knowledge also as their counterpart. That's a lot of training we do with them. Our students also, we do a lot of orientation so that when they do presentation, they go out to the villages, they also help women in the local government so that the women also can contribute in their leadership. That's what kind of training I am talking about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Julia. And for the time's sake, I'm taking one last question from Helga. Helga asks, does any of the countries refer to have a right of nature, earth in her constitution, or on which legal basis can women claim protection of nature, human rights to livelihood, and promote peace? Anyone wants to respond? Maybe Diana?
En nuestra constitución
Yes, in our constitution, we don't see it beyond the basic principles of the constitution, but there have been a lot of pronouncements from our constitutional court which have been, like I mentioned before, is a interpretation of the constitutional letter, and in several occasions has legislated on this issue. And of course, we also base ourselves a lot on the international treaties, and Colombia has signed all the possible international treaties, but not all of them have been incorporated in the laws of the country. And so what we do see is that collective rights are in the Constitution, and from there is where we see the mechanisms for community participation, but this is a very new issue, at least in a country that has been involved in conflict through arms. It's still a very new process in our development.
Thank you very much, Diana, and unfortunately we do not have a lot of time for final remarks from the speakers. So now I give the floor to Ms. Elise Verming. I hope I read your name correct, who is the gender advisor at PAX for saying some closing remarks, please.
Thank you very much, Maha, and you said my name absolutely correctly. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much to our co-organizers, the government of Sweden and WILPF, and colleagues at PAX for convening this panel on the margins of the 66 CSW convening. Particularly, I'd really like to warm-heartedly thank all our inspirational panelists and moderators. These powerful women environmental activists that you are and professionals, taking risks accompanied with speaking out publicly, as you've done. Thanks for that. Our sisterhood is strong. This is such an incredibly crucial and timely discussion to explore the nexus of gender, conflict, climate, and the environment. As we have heard here today, women, girls, and gender minorities are uniquely and disproportionately affected by the damaging environmental impacts of conflict, while lacking access to shape decision-making to impact that. Due to the impacts of conflict on polluting water sources, decreasing agricultural livelihoods, and deforestation, families and communities are forcibly displaced, and often in the process, women and girls further exposed to sexual and gender-based violence. I think it's been clearly remarked on by panelists that we live in patriarchal, militaristic, and capitalist realities, and that we counter those as women leaders. And this women leadership is so crucial to ensure authorities protect environmental resources and demand accountability. It's been mentioned by several of our panelists. We've also heard about the environmental impact of military operations. Women, time and time again, shoulder the majority burden for the survival of their families and communities while having such little influence. PAX is an organization, peace organization, active in 15 conflict-affected countries, has researched the devastating impacts of conflicts and consequently civilian lives and livelihoods. It's been evidenced now by the speakers today and the ongoing attacks that we are seeing in the Ukraine as in other country contexts. Our environmental and conflict alerts, including in Ukraine, Gaza, Syria, and Iraq, have demonstrated the harmful and environmental effects of armed conflicts. Time and time again, conflict has directly or indirectly caused oil leaks, water and land pollution, wildfire, loss of biodiversity, deforestation, and as said today, a real sort of spiritual disconnection with land as we've understood it for generations. At the same time, we have seen the fierce women leaders that are working towards environmental peace building, breaking through traditional gender norms and risking violent backlash. Personally, I've found it incredibly inspiring to hear from our panelists what innovative approaches women leaders take to counter these detrimental impacts by demanding influence, first and foremost, and access to decision-making, while fighting to protect land, biodiversity, and water access in their own communities. Essentially, and lastly, gender represents an important system of power. We need to work towards gender equality in influencing environmental peace building in conflict-affected areas to ensure holistic and inclusive environmental governance, climate policies, and peace processes. We must come together as we've done today to share and learn from one another so that we can strengthen calls for a gendered approach in environmental peace building and demands that the international community support women leaders and activists to lead this decision making. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Elise, and thank you to our speakers and to all of you attending this timely discussion that we hope to continue. I would also like to thank the organizers again and colleagues behind the scene for making this event possible, Brittany and Christina. Also, please follow up PAX social media platform where this recording will be posted again, so you can share it with your friends and colleagues, and also follow them for relevant discussions on this topic. Thank you very much and take care. Bye.